Hello, I'm Pamela Obilman, the Dean of the Roy D. Perry College of Engineering at Prairie View A&M University, and I will be the moderator for this session. In this session, the panelists will be discussing successful collaborations between MSIs and PWIs, and they will talk about uh, what made them successful, as well as unsuccessful collaborations and what made them unsuccessful. Each speaker will be given 10 minutes for a presentation, and then after each speaker gives that presentation, we will have a question and answer session where the audience can engage with the speakers. So, with that being said, our first panelist is Dr. Felicia Benton Johnson. She is the Assistant Dean in the College of Engineering at Georgia Tech. She has established herself as a national leading practitioner in developing and implementing and enhancing diversity and inclusion collaborations and programs that broaden participation in STEM fields. She is recognized as an expert in broadening participation in STEM, and she has received several national and institutional awards for her work. With that being said, I will turn the stage over to Dr. Benton Johnson.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm so excited to be here, and today I will be talking about several different efforts that have been successful here at Georgia Tech with minority serving institutions. First slide, next slide, please. So, and it's in regards to Georgia Tech and connecting efforts with minority serving institutions, we've taken an authentic collaborative approach. Academically, when it comes to research innovation, industry relations, and programming. So when I speak of academic relations, our first and foremost has been our dual degree engineering program, and I'll speak to that later. That's a program that we established with Atlanta University Center that includes Clark Atlanta University, Morehouse College, and Spelman College, allowing students to receive a BS degree in from their home institution and then an engineering degree from Georgia Tech. We've also developed course development where we've collaborated on expanding course content as well as faculty development. When it comes to research, we focused on faculty student research collaborations where we have actually had partnered with these different institutions to have students come over and conduct research at Georgia Tech in the summer as academic year, but there's also have been collaborative faculty research that have taken place. And then the one thing that really has driven this too are the use of engineering research centers acting as a foundation to support and to expand our relationships and partnership with minority serving institutions. And something that we've just started is Research Next, which is a statewide collaborative where we're focusing on what's next in innovation and research. And we're actually partnering with Atlanta University Center within this partnership, as well as going beyond those within the state of Georgia. When we talk about industry collaboration, we've utilized industry collaboration as a recruitment vehicle. As you know, we have corporate entities that have their priority schools, but we have utilized this relationship where they use Georgia Tech as their priority school. But when we do events, we've collaborated where we bring minority serving institutions to the fold, as well as doing collaborating on funding opportunities within industry and helping them establish connections. And I'll go deeper on the next slide, but I'm not ready to move to the next slide. And when it comes to programming, we have, offices and organizations with the student organizations collaborating, as well as, support structures that we have to help students, promote them through their matriculation, as well as help them thrive throughout their college journey and leveraging resources. Next slide, please. So on this next slide, I focus in on the really uh, ground holding areas of each academic, research, industry, and programming that have really made our relationship successful. So I mentioned the dual degree engineering program. That is something that has been going on since 1969. We have that not just with Atlanta University Center, but Xavier and New Orleans and Dillard as well. As well as many other HBCUs, community colleges, and gender specific. What has made this work is that we've actually, looked at curriculum, had curriculum in place. We can have communication that takes place not just with faculty, but also with program directors who are supporting the students within their academic journey. So this is an area that has really increased our relationships. And because of that, it has pivoted. I will pivot into the research centers. We have the large engineering research center, cell manufacturing, CMAT, but prior to that, we had one GTech, which was the engineering research center. And with CMAT, we're actually partnering with University of Puerto Rico Maya Gas, and they are a partner in this large research center. So that has really spearheaded, more research collaborations between faculty, bringing industry to the table, providing financial resources, and acting as an anchor for partnership expansion. And when I mean as an anchor, I'm saying we're talking about now moving from a BS degree when we're in our dual degree program to adding a BS-MS pathway for these students. But also prior to the CMAT Engineering Research Center, GTech Research Center, they actually, that research center was with Georgia Tech, Morehouse School of Medicine, and Spelman and Emory. And that really had brought leaders within each department to talk about curriculum, collaboration, expansion. We also did visitation of faculty visits to each institution, sabbaticals, sharing of equipment, and utilizing graduate assistants at these institutions. So that was really, I would say, leverage, engineering research centers. When it comes to industry funding opportunities, when we meet with companies that are really interested in the partnerships that we have with minority serving institutions, we say, hey, we bring them to the table. First of all, we expand the access, but we also leverage that. And when I say leverage, we mention to them, look, they put in a proposal and we put in a proposal. So it's two different proposals, not just money coming to Georgia Tech, but it's money also going to the minority serving institution, but also bringing awareness to industry about what the MSIs have to offer and the value that they bring. So those are the funding opportunities and the ways in which we leverage industry. And lastly, when it comes to programming, we leverage our resources. For an example, student financial support is huge. So we utilize, if one institution has a scholarship, we ensure, like we've done with Spelman, that they have a scholarship that's supported by industry, and then it transfers over to Georgia Tech. Also sharing a staff. We've had staff that are hired on the Georgia Tech side, but they also work and report to the minority institution where they're shared. When you're in proximity, you're able to do that. We're leveraging our LSAMP and AGEP. The one thing, I'm a PI of one of our AGEPs. And what we're doing now, we are partnering and leading with other institutional AGEPs that are minority serving institutions. And we see that minority serving institutions are looking for faculty and program development, as well as we're looking at their learning from their best practices. So we've joined with Tuskegee University. We've joined with Florida A&M. And what we've done here, we know students at our institution who are PhD looking to go into academia, but they may not want to go into academia at a institution such as a Georgia Tech, but they really have the passion to be in academia at a minority serving institution. So we're leveraging those relationships and putting those students in front of our minority serving institutions, as well as building transfer bridge programs for students who are transferring from these different programs. Next slide, please. So, with that, the one thing that I want to say is that what really makes all of this work, not only because they're authentic collaborations, but it's the institutional buy-in that makes it a success. So having institutional buy-in at every level has been critical in all of these programs, as you see that I've mentioned, from academic, our dual degree program, research centers, bringing industry to the table, as well as programming and supporting students and faculty and promoting them and thriving them during their academic journey. And I'll stop there and answer any questions, or I think we're saving questions to the end.
Oh, well, thank you so very much for that. Um, so our next panelist will be Professor Michael Dennin. He is a professor of physics and astronomy and the vice provost for teaching and learning and the dean in the division of undergraduate education at the University of California, Irvine. He is a Sloan Research Fellow and a Research Corporation, is it Cottrell Scholar? He has appeared on numerous television programs, including Science of Superman, Spider-Man Tech, Batman Tech, Star Wars Tech, and Ancient Aliens. You can find Professor Denon in the YouTube series Fascinating Flights. Professor Denning, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you. I'll wait a second for the slides to come up. There they are. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. One of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit is before I talk about some of our collaborations at UCI with minority serving institutions with MSIs, is some of the challenges and excitement at UCI and opportunities as we transitioned ourselves um, to becoming an MSI and what it meant for us as a PWI transitioning to an MSI, how we handle that as a major research university, but as a public university as part of the UC system. And I thought it would be just interesting to briefly show this slight timeline and what sort of happened here at UCI. And a lot of the changes, they started in around 2010. You can see these are various percentages of first gen, low income, Hispanic, international, and Black students. And what occurred is this sort of series of events where we, in around 2014, realized we were on the path to being designated Hispanic serving. And it was of great interest for the faculty and administration to actually not just be an HSI in name only, but actually what we called Hispanic Thriving Institution. So, in preparation for that, we convened a work group and prepared a report on what this would mean. We actually were designated ANAPISI serving before HSI. And so then we actually visited that issue and how would we be ANAPISI thriving. And then recently, back in 2020, we announced the Black Thriving Initiative on our campus and have been involved in various different activities. And, noted here, we were awarded the Bronze Sea Change, and we formed a Latinx Thriving Alliance with Orange County. And I bring this up because I think it's been an interesting process and transition to watch, and really ask the question, what does it mean at a campus like UCI to be actually minority thriving? On the one hand, one of the exciting things about becoming an MSI is it is access to resources. It allows us to apply for various federal grants, and we've had a number of these. We piloted a decade plus program, we called it. This was a particular program where grad students would mentor undergraduates. This was focused on our ANAPISI status, but it allowed us to bring in students with many different backgrounds. We had a situation where students receiving what were called chancellor scholarships. These were scholarships um, for first year students. They were scholarships focused on excellence, but for traditionally underserved students at UCI, focusing on our low income students, which were also predominantly, in many cases, Hispanic or Black students. And we were noticing a challenge with having our students maintain their scholarships. And so we developed the program of mentoring from grad students to undergrads that was a very successful both scholarship retention program, but actually engaged the students with the grad students in a way that showed increased outcomes of students wanting to go to grad school, becoming interested in grad school. So that was an internal mechanism to improve the success and thriving of students within UCI itself. We are also looking with this community partnership to really engage the local Latinx community in a much more meaningful and deeper way. And what we have found is that community is very interested in the undergraduate population and undergraduate students and supporting them, but also incredibly interested now in the graduate student journey, because as we have more and more students successfully, entering and becoming undergrads, the next step is that grad experience. And so if you go to the next slide, that is kind of the space where our partnerships has focused. And really, most of our partnerships are around the graduate and then the faculty pathways through bridge programs and other initiatives, and really leveraging the UC system in a very exciting way to accomplish a lot of this. So I just put a couple bullet points up here, and I'll comment on a few of these in different ways. So one, I want to focus on some of the bridge programs we have that have come through what we call the Inclusive Graduate Education Network. And really, three bridge programs in that area were one through the American Geophysical Union, one through the APS, and one through Chemistry and American Chemical Society. And it really is focused on bringing students from a wide range of backgrounds into the graduate programs. And these are all relatively new, but we're very excited about them and where they're going. The AGU bridge is from 2019. Cal Bridge is an interesting bridge program we have because it really focuses on the Cal states and leverages that connection and structure in California. Um, we do a little bit at the undergrad level still. We have, for instance, an STEM physics scholar program to draw in undergraduates. And what we are looking at with these bridge programs is sort of piloting partnership fellowships, where we add additional supplemental funds to bring students in the summer before their experience and to give them a head start. The other program I wanted to mention briefly, in addition to the bridge programs, is kind of that next stage, something that's been very successful at UCI and across the UC system, is this UCI Presidential Postdoctoral Fellow Program. Because again, in the UC system, a number of the UCs are now minority serving institutions. And one of the challenges is that sort of last step from postdoc to faculty. The postdoc fellows are a great sort of transition and recruiting tool, because if a student becomes a presidential postdoctoral fellow, there's a lot of money associated with them becoming their first faculty position. And I wanted to save this kind of for the last point, because I think one of the elements that we are thinking about in these partnerships, when we think about the bridge to graduate students, the bridge to postdocs, and then the bridge to faculty, is that unfortunately a structural element in higher ed is that too often we look in the same places for the grad students and faculty. Um, that really the quality, and I use that in quotes, of students is often too closely tied to the graduate program, the undergraduate program they're in, then the graduate program they're in, then where they had their postdoc, as we consider this pathway to graduate school, postdoc, and faculty. And we don't have a good history and track record of intentionally and actively recruiting the great students that are in many of these other places, including HBCUs and others. And so these explicit partnership programs that really are targeted for recruiting into grad school and the professoriate are something we really hope to continue to leverage and expand. So that's just a taste of some of the things we're doing and some of the issues we're kind of struggling with and thinking about. And I look forward to the questions during the question period. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Great stuff. Um, our next panelist is Dr. Teru Paula Vanam. He is a Tooker professor and assistant dean of engineering education at Arizona State University's Ara Fulton School of Engineering. Ganesh is an engineer, educator, and education researcher who designs, implements, and studies learning environments that offer opportunities for mastery learning in both K through 12 and university settings. He is an investigator for a National Science Foundation sponsored project that is aimed at designing, implementing, and systematically studying the impact of engineering education programs in undergraduate and K through 12 settings. With that being said, Ganesh, I will turn the stage over to you.
Thank you for that introduction. I am an assistant dean for engineering education. I'll be speaking about our most recent NSF project, and it includes pilot project that was funded in 2017. It's called Engineers from Day One. Next slide, please. And I want to start with a little bit of context for our charter. Our charter is designed to include students rather than exclude. So our admission standards are somewhat different than other institutions in that if a student is missing a year of science or mathematics, is not calc ready, for instance, if an engineering degree program requires that you be admitted to engineering with a Calc 1 class as the first class you would take in the fall semester, the student is still admitted and has up to a year to get Calc ready, which means that they may have to spend an extra year in their undergraduate degree program, 5 years instead of 4 years. But it is a way to ensure that students who have raised their hand and said that they want an opportunity to become an engineer are well supported. We offer free tutoring. Many students are actually admitted needing to take college algebra as first-time full-time freshmen. So our inclusion mission has paid great dividends. And our college serves around 25,000 undergraduate and graduate students in engineering. Next slide, please. Of whom around 28% are minority students, barring Asians and international students. And our context is that we base our work on serving first generation and underrepresented youth who need to see role models who are like themselves. And with 30%, nearing 30% of our population being minority students, most of them are Hispanic, around 21% are Hispanic. We base our work inspired by child rights activist, the great American civil rights activist, Marian Edelman, who inspires us with her quote that we need to make sure that role models are available to students. Next slide, please. So this Collective Impact Alliance that was funded by the Includes pilot project included a number of school districts in the area and Maricopa Community Colleges, one of the largest community college systems in Arizona. At one time, 15 years ago, the community colleges in Maricopa, which is a system of 10 colleges, used to have over 200,000 students. However, since 2010, a steady decline has resulted in a current enrollment of less than 100,000 students across the 10 colleges. However, 9 of the 10 colleges are designated as Hispanic serving institutions. So this gives you a sense of our effort of trying to build a pathway for students to enter engineering and persist in engineering. By working with these specific school districts, we were trying to see if we could share data and learn from each other. And one of the things you'd be surprised to learn, which we were surprised to learn, is many school districts don't often track who amongst them is first generation. And another important context is that the state of Arizona in 2010 passed a proposition, a constitutional amendment that bans affirmative action programs that give preferential treatment to or discriminate against individuals or groups on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in public education, public contracting, public employment. And this means that we cannot have programs that are exclusively for Hispanics or African American students or Native American students or women, that all services are open to everybody. So everything we offer has to be done at scale. Next slide, please. We use this approach of what I call AEIOU, that it is really important to increase awareness, enjoyment, interest, opinion formation in engineering, all of which will ultimately lead to understanding what engineering can offer to students, both as personal relevance and social relevance. Next slide, please. So what we do as a result is we offer opportunities for both high school students and community college students to visit us on our campus, tour our engineering facilities. We interact with them. Our undergraduate students offer a research symposia every fall and spring. We invite these high school and community college students to attend them. There's an innovation showcase where final year students present their material. They get to meet with academic advisors, talk about transfer issues. They learn about both our online and our face-to-face program is called immersion degree programs. They learn about both of these options. Next slide, please. And we also help by going to the community colleges and presenting to them about opportunities that they will have when they come to engineering at ASU. We invite them to attend residential programs in the summer, sometimes offer a stipend so students in the community colleges don't experience a loss of income because most of them also work. We invite them to work at or join our REUs, and RETs are also offered for our community college educators to work with the university researchers in engineering. And our ERCs play a big role in this, like Dr. Felicia Benton talked about. And we also invite students to bring their families to our college for a tour. Next slide, please. So this fostering of engineering identity has also been developed through engineering projects in community service, which is a 1-credit course that's offered at ASU, is now also being offered in our Maricopa community colleges. And this gives them an opportunity to work with a nonprofit and design a solution to a problem. And we fund these through industry supports. Basically, student teams are funded with money to deliver a product to their nonprofit client. Next slide, please. Most important are these tools that help students who want to transfer to ASU, whether they're from Arizona or from outside of Arizona. First is the transfer pathway tool. And the second is the transfer articulation system that's been around for over 20 years. Across the state, community colleges, tribal schools, tribal colleges, and the 3 state universities work with each other to make sure that there's a very clear transfer articulation system. You could put in any course you would like at that web page, aztransfer.com, and you would find it, and find its equivalencies in the state system, which is quite unique and very helpful for transfer students. And My Path to ASU, next slide, please, allows you to see how, if somebody is enrolled in My Path to ASU can then see the students' course taking at their community college and guide them on the appropriate courses that they need to take, which is a very helpful way to support their transfer. So they don't take courses that are not necessary for their chosen degree, and hopefully are transferring in with the appropriate course credits. And it also, next slide, please, also allows us to invite students to events and activities at ASU. Next slide, please. So the transfer articulation system, as I mentioned, has been around for a very long time, is an easy resource that puts data at the hands of students. And this is a very unique and very useful tool for students who are attempting to transfer to ASU, whether from a community college or from another university. Next slide, please. We also have a very large set of offerings of undergraduate degree programs. These are completely online. And this is where we've seen a very large increase in our enrollment of minorities. Next slide, please. Here you will see some data comparing 2014-15 to 2019-20 pre-COVID data. You will see that African American enrollment in our online degree programs as transfer students has gone up by 128%, and Hispanic or Latino students has gone up by 104%. Next slide, please. So our challenges is that we need to fund students who transfer beyond their Pell Grants because they're often working and they need additional support. And what we would like to see happen is to build concurrent enrollment programs like what was mentioned by our first speaker. We currently have an example with our nursing program. And next slide, please. I would like to acknowledge that this work was supported by the National Science Foundation. And I'll look forward to questions in the Q&A session. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ganesh. That was excellent.
Thank
So
you.
our last and final speaker will be Dr. Sharita. I'm sorry, is it Dr. Sharnita Lee? And she is an assistant dean and the director of the Graduate School's Office of Recruitment, Diversity, and Inclusion at Virginia Tech. Dr. Lee specializes in student engagement, programming, and outreach. She is passionate about creating a diverse and inclusive environment for graduate students, improving graduate student retention, aiding in navigation of challenges of graduate students, and she's also passionate about directing students to university departmental resources and advocates for them to successfully complete the degree. Okay, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Lee.
Thank you. All right, thanks for the introduction. So I wanted to kind of approach this a little differently than some of my colleagues. As mentioned, my role focuses on recruitment as well as retention. So I wanted to give an idea of one program that we have at Virginia Tech, which is highly successful, which merges together perfectly this theme focused on HBCU MSIs with a PWI like Virginia Tech. Next slide, please. So that event is our annual HBCU MSI Summit. It started initially through our College of Engineering. So I know many people here have engineering interests, but since then we've expanded to include all of our other colleges. We have over 100 graduate programs. So being such a large institution, we definitely know that there is something to offer students who are students at HBCUs or MSIs. A lot of this work also is personal to me because I attended an HBCU and also attended Virginia Tech for my PhD. So I know firsthand that transition, figuring out what are you doing, the imposter syndrome and so forth to make sure that we can address some of the concerns that those students will have early on. So this summit invites undergraduate students, graduate students who are master students at HBCUs or MSIs, as well as faculty members. So thinking about those three groups, we also engage with the members of the Virginia Tech community, and we focused on three specific tiers. The first tier is research. Being an R1 institution, we have access to a lot of resources. So we want to make sure that we do something that is beneficial for the HBCU MSI, as well as things that will support the mission of our institution as well. So the research is that first cornerstone piece, because through research, that's how you can engage with students. That's where you can have faculty collaborations and so forth. The next arm is recruitment, right? These students from HBCUs, MSIs, they have a lot of options of where they can go to grad school. We want to make sure that we let them know what does that process look like. We go through what does the graduate school process look like at Virginia Tech? What are some things you can do as a sophomore, as a junior, or even as a first year master's student to make you competitive and successful as a graduate student once you pick what institution you would like to attend. So we bring them here for a couple days. They come to Southwest Virginia and see what mountain life is like, as well as get a feel for their experience if they decide to pursue their graduate work here. They also are able to meet with other graduate students and with faculty members to again get that experience firsthand about what it would be like to be at Virginia Tech. So the recruitment piece happens at multiple stages. Sometimes it is working with that faculty member at Virginia Tech and then a faculty member from the HBCU MSI. And then they have students they want to, pass along to that collaborator at Virginia Tech so they can continue to bridge that connection. So it is very much so multi-layered. And the third piece is degree partnerships. There are a lot of informal partnerships that take place at an institution of this size, but we do have a few official partnerships with HBCUs, which I will reference in coming slides. Next slide, please. All right, so I won't have time to go through all of this with my 10 minutes here, but you see the three goals again: research, degree partnerships, and recruitment. So this is some of the work from a graduate student that worked closely in my office for 3 years, focused on that interinstitutional partnerships between HBCUs, MSIs, and specifically Virginia Tech. So through his research, we were able to publish a manuscript, which you can see the short link here, as well as figure out what are some best practices, what are some things that we should modify about this event. And so with that, it has evolved over time based on surveys. We have an R&B for that to make sure that we have the responses from collaborators from the HBCU MSI side, as well as those from Virginia Tech. So the schedule is kind of listed here roughly, and it does change each year, whether we have faculty panels, student panels. We have dialogue opportunities between just faculty members. Some things are only for students, such as campus tour. Allow them to have networking opportunities, things that are really important and valuable for students to experience, as well as for some of those faculty members. Sometimes faculty members, often from those smaller institutions, they know they need a collaborator, but they just don't have the setting or opportunity to form that new relationship. So this HBCU Summit is an opportunity for them to do such, meet with others in the department. They don't have to feel limited to just one particular individual, and we like to have departments host to make sure that that person is taken care of once they are attending the summit. All right, next slide, please. So the dates for our summit has been set for 2022. Being in a small town, we have to have dates secured pretty early. And so it's going to be November 6th through the 8th. I mentioned this here because having this event for 3 days, 2 nights is a first. People always said they didn't have enough time with 2 days and 1 night, and this was a recommendation from the students' research that I referenced before. So we're constantly improving the programming, listening to the needs of past attendees, as well as those who are new to participation in this summit, to make sure that we're successful at accomplishing our goals. Virginia Tech does have multiple campus locations, which probably some of my peers do as well. But this is focused primarily on our Blacksburg campus, which is our largest campus. Here we have roughly 6,000 graduate students on this campus. And again, we have multiple sites in other cities as well. So while they may be interested in the program elsewhere, we like to make sure they're aware of those resources through our primary campus here in Blacksburg, Virginia. Next slide, please. I mentioned before, the third arm of the HBCU MSI Summit is focused on partnerships. So Virginia Tech Graduate School has 2 formal partnerships. One is with Virginia State University, and that is specifically with our Industrial and Systems Engineering program. That is where the student completes roughly 3 years at Virginia State, and they finish the last 2 years at Virginia Tech. And then at the end of that program, they will have the bachelor's degree as well as a master's degree. We have partnerships with other institutions as well that aren't HBCUs, thinking about some of the courses that we have available here. And we have a general partnership with FAMU, Florida A&M University, and that one just mentions that we will try to recruit their students once they're here, try to provide financial support. Big thing in recruitment is not just providing exposure and saying, here's a great school to attend, but also make sure that financial support is there. So assistantships, and once they're here, making sure the programming is in place to make sure that student is successful and able to complete that degree in a reasonable amount of time. I've shared here, sorry it's a little blurry, is an opportunity because partnerships are all over campus. It will probably take me all day to list everything that's happening within the institution, but CUBE is focused on exposure of underrepresented students to STEM, specifically thinking about statistics and how that relates to epidemiology or health sciences. And so for this opportunity, the goal is to make sure that information was shared with HBCUs because it's 2 locations. This is focused on one site at Virginia State, and the other location would be Virginia Tech. So it's hard sometimes to get information to these institutions. I think that's been some of the challenge for a lot of new faculty members, is just not having contacts and they haven't established those relationships yet. So there are a lot of opportunities. Some of them tend to be more in the STEM discipline, but again, we offer a lot of things at Virginia Tech, even outside of the scope of STEM. Next slide, please. And another example, I wanted to again give you some of the programmatic things that are taking place soon, is a partnership with GlycoMIP. So that's for those who are interested in chemistry or more of the life sciences. Again, thinking about the equipment and resources that we have access to at Virginia Tech. GlycoMIP is funded by the National Science Foundation and is partnered with the other institutions you see listed here. And so if you have needs for synthesis, characterization, or modeling of different proteins, they have that preview set for April 27th, where you can learn about the facility. Oftentimes it is free or reduced costs. And so again, having taught at HBCU and attended HBCU, sometimes they can make a huge difference in getting that first grant or getting that publication for a student who needs that to propel them into their graduate work. And so I encourage you all to check that out if that's something of interest as well, as we think about some of those tangible aspects of forming those new partnerships beyond just thinking about formal agreements such as MOUs, but thinking about those programs, resources that we have available for others to use. Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Lots of great information. So at this time, I'd like for all of the panelists to come back to the stage, and we will begin our Q&A session. Can all the panelists please come back to the stage? So the first question I see, I'm going to point it toward, let's see, I will point the first question to Felicia, and the reason why is because it popped up when you were speaking. So the question is, what recommendations do you have for PWIs that are not in close proximity to MSIs to foster engagement, partnerships, and recruitment of MSI students for research, graduate programs, and faculty?
So that's a great question. So for those that are not in proximity, I would say to host very focused programs. So what I mean is we have a program where we're identifying diverse talent who are looking to go into academia. So we recruit nationwide and we invite them to campus for 4 to 5 days, and this gets them in front of faculty with similar research thrusts, as well as in front of chairs and leadership. They hear from current students and they get a feel, right? We get them a research talk. So you're bringing them to you. At the same time, those same institutions go do visit lectures, right? Have talks at those different institutions that are not local. We do the same, not just for faculty, but also for students we're looking to recruit, right? So we host a large minority focused graduate recruitment weekend where we bring students in from across the nation, and they're visiting departments. They're hearing from students and faculty that look like them, alums that look like them, and talk about their experiences, as well as we visit, the other campuses that are not local who are having those same types of events. So the thing is, I would say have programs that bring them to the PWIs to experience, but also when you're doing the collaboration, we also have a hub. We built a database where we are connecting minority serving institution faculty who are doing research, right? So that's a place that they can go to identify others who are doing that same research, to link so they can put joint proposals in place. So I hope that answered your question.
Okay, are there any other comments from the other panelists? Okay, Ganesh?
So we built a program called Suri, which works with HBCUs through industry partners. So Intel played the broker, if you will, and I put a link to that program in the chat, so you can see that. And that was a way for us to attract students from minority serving institutions that are far away from our region and bring them to ASU. It started actually during COVID time. And this is the first year we're now moving to an in-person program this summer. So this is a way for us to sort of attract students from MSIs with industry support, and students get a $5,000 stipend, which makes a big difference in making sure that they have a rich experience.
Okay.
And are supported when they're doing the research.
All right. Okay, so I'll move on to the next question, and this is to anyone who would like to address this question. Have you found any structures not to be helpful in programs and partnerships between MSIs and PWIs, basically unsuccessful programs? And is there anything that the others or the audience should take away from this? Any unsuccessful programs? Okay.
I would say
Ganesh?
that it's a basic answer. I'm sure others may have things to add, but our big challenge is oftentimes people tend to do things by themselves and just make an announcement saying we want people to show up. That never works. It requires a lot of legwork, faculty to faculty collaborations across multiple institutions. And really, leadership also needs to play a role by talking to each other, by visiting with each other in their respective institutions. For instance, the Dean, Kyle Squires, who is now also Vice Provost for Engineering and Technology, our Vice Dean for Academic Affairs, and myself, along with other faculty, frequently go visit other institutions, meet with the leadership, meet with faculty. We have exchanges, we have meetings where we invite community college faculty to visit us, tour our facilities. If you don't build those relationships over time, you're not going to have any success. And that's a basic story. I mean, that's sort of a given, if you will. I see a lot of nodding heads.
Well, as the moderator, I am in complete agreement with that. We've had some failed ones where we didn't do those things, and that was the major cause. Okay.
I wanted to chime in just a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Okay,
Yes.
sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah, so when reading through that question and reading over a couple times, another thing I think to avoid if you want those partnerships to be successful is oftentimes, even when thinking about agreements, the signees are not going to be the persons to actually implement and do the work. So usually have your provosts, your deans, that's who's signing off with these agreements. But it's going to require the recruiter, the program, and have buy-in from so many other persons who may not be aware of the terms of that agreement, and also make sure that that constant evaluation is happening. Just because it was listed in agreement 2 or 3 years ago, it may not be up to date. Their needs might have changed for their students. And so I found myself when I first started in this position, it's like, we have agreements with who? What are we supposed to do? Tell me more. And making sure that even departments were aware of the agreement so that they can take advantage of some of this benefits as well. So so that's something I would say, to just speak on the other side of that, is with those partnerships, making sure that it's clear the expectations, even involving budget office, right? They may not sign off, but when you have a student transition, especially in these dual enrollments or accelerated programs, money runs a lot of institutions. And so if they leave at one institution, they have to pay for credits at another one. So make sure the right persons are at the table to make sure that it is a smooth transition for students. That's what matters most. They don't care about bursar's office or any of these other titles at the institution. They just want to make sure that they receive the education or what was promised to them between both institution types.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll move on to the next question. And this next question says, the Virginia Tech Summit looks awesome. Do you fund students and faculty to come to your summits? And if so, could you share a little bit of how you do so? Is it via industry or external or internal funding?
Great questions. Let me speak with the short answer first. Generally speaking, we cover lodging and food, and that is for all attendees, whether they're faculty, staff, students. Looks a lot of different ways depending on the institution. So we cover that. The only main thing is the travel piece. We work closely with the different departments, and so depending on where people are coming from, for instance, last year we had people from Oakwood, which is in Alabama. We also had students come from FAMU. So for them, they stayed an extra day. The departments will help offset some of the costs to make sure they were able to have a good time as well as enjoy the length of their stay here for the summit. But the lodging costs in itself and the meals is a lot. Typically, I didn't give a size idea for you for the summit. We typically have between 150 to 200 people. So managing lodging and meals for those persons as well as those within the Virginia Tech community. I'm having discussions with some external industry persons to see about support specifically for that travel piece. We piloted out last year having students attend independent of a faculty member. That was new, and surprisingly, students were pretty responsible. They were like, I want to come, I'm interested. And initially, again, it was tied to a faculty member. So that was a new transition and change that we made. So with that, we definitely want to consider making sure that funds are available for students who want to travel to Virginia Tech, especially if they're coming from the West Coast or somewhere that is not within driving distance to the institution. So depending on the department, there may be some funds available to help offset some of that.
Great. So our next question, I'm going to point this toward Michael. It says, any thoughts as to how to increase broader awareness of students, broader awareness for students, counselors, and about the availability of scholarships and opportunities? So how do you increase that awareness?
That is a great challenge. Yeah, I'll start. I mean, since you mentioned my name, but it's a great challenge. I have 3 semi-adult children, 2 in college, and the scholarship world is incredibly confusing and even hard for us to navigate. And I supposedly have all that social capital, which I do, and I don't want to minimize it. But if it's hard for me, I can only imagine for other people. I mean, I'm in the academic world. I should know what all of these scholarships are. And I alluded to this in my initial remarks. I think it's the responsibility of us as the institutions with the scholarships to be way more intentional and engaged out there. We can't just say, oh, it's good enough that we have a scholarship and we publish it on a website, or we even send it to the right organizations. We need to be doing what we often do when it comes traditionally to getting grad students or postdocs in our lab. Faculty call the people they know and say, do you have any grad students? We need to call the people we don't know. We need to reach out to the institutions where there are these excellent students that just are getting missed because no one's reaching out to them. And I know that takes time and effort, but we spend our time and effort in lots of different ways, and the direct outreach, I think, is one of the first things we have to just commit to, sort of an intentionality in getting our scholarships and opportunities out there.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, Ganesh.
So we, echoing what was just mentioned by Dr. Denin, we actually have a President Obama scholarship for first-time full-time freshmen, which I'll put the link to the webpage here in the chat. It's for Arizona residents, and it allows us to basically give Arizona residents who have a family income of $42,400 or less to apply and receive scholarships. That pretty much pays for their entire college experience if they maintain their GPA. And oftentimes, increasing awareness about this means working with high school counselors, high school advisors around the state, and also reaching out to first generation students and others who might qualify through a phone campaign. So we have undergraduate students calling them and telling them about applying to the scholarship. And the earlier they apply, the better, because there's a priority deadline to make sure that students receive the scholarship. So there are all sorts of ways in which you can increase access, and working with schools, working with high school counselors, working with the community college leadership to ensure that these scholarship opportunities are um, easily accessible and students know and are aware of it. I'm going to put another link in the chat, which is for transfer students. There are a number of private donors who fund scholarships, and we work constantly, and we actually use peer-to-peer networks to convey the information, which helps a lot.
You know, one of the things too, for in particular for African Americans, I really think you could reach a lot uh, of that population by reaching out to churches, um, various churches. You can really share that information. Okay, so we'll move on to the next question, and I will point that toward you, Ganesh. What barriers or challenges did you all experience in the early development of these programs? And in the others, please follow.
So it requires infrastructure, which we often don't talk about. And in our case, we've always had a provost level position, a vice provost level position at the institution, who's in charge of building relationships with community colleges, not only in the state, but across the nation. And these leaders often come from other community college leaderships roles that they've held before. So our current leader is Dr. Cheryl Hyman, who is a leader in community college systems and used to be in the Chicago area. You might recognize her name. She's a well-published author as well. She's a dynamic leader, and her office has an infrastructure that helps with transfer articulation, that helps with making relationships with other institutions. She sits on boards of advisory boards of the community colleges or other institutions. I, in fact, serve on a advisory board for the president of a local community college, and others from our faculty do as well. These kinds of infrastructures are very much needed at the university level, but at the community college level, we also need collaborators. So for instance, every time a faculty member reaches out to me and says, I play a role where I advise and consult with faculty who are writing proposals to the NSF or the Department of Energy or whomever, on how to integrate their research into education. And when they come to me, what I try to do is say, okay, how about you work with a community college? We reach out to the district office in Maricopa or other community colleges and say, here's a faculty member, here's a one-page description of what they would like to do. Can you help disseminate this amongst your appropriate faculty? And that relationship is very, very strong. I can pick up the phone and call the individuals in the research office at Maricopa and say, can you help us? And they can do the same with us. And that is very important.
Okay. Are there any other comments from the panelists?
And I would say funding opportunities, right? So the challenges for us have been, the students transfer or they come in our graduate pathways, but having the funding to support these students once they come, right? Over time. And we've received, buy-in from the provost office to offer out-of-state tuition waivers, because many a time the students who attend certain schools, they're from out of state, especially if they're minority serving institutions. because here they're private, right? So then they're transferring to Georgia Tech, they're out of state. And so we're looking at that piece, as well as working with the partnering institution to have a corporate entity to provide funding, a scholarship while they're at their home institution that follows them to the partnering institution. So, that has for us been at one point was a barrier for us. And we started working on that and developing fundraising to support students who come through those pathways.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next question. And the next one is, what challenges have you experienced in developing faculty research collaborations across institutions, and have you overcome them? Anyone can answer that one.
I'll just say I'm really looking forward to hearing the other panelists' answers, because I think that's one of the reasons, if you noticed in sort of the remarks I've made, we've been focused a lot on pathways. And there was the earlier question about partnering with people and institutions that are not near you. We do have Cal States near us, so that's something we have experience with. But sort of that was robust. I love the word authentic in the other presentations. Collaborations for faculty research collaborations across institutions, particularly in STEM fields that are lab-based. I'm just going to echo that question. It is a challenge. I would not say we've necessarily overcome them yet successfully. So that's why I jumped in, so I could hear answers from the other panelists.
So one thing I know we did with the ERC GTech, which was, in the early 2000s, what was very interesting was not what you would call a typical visiting faculty, right? We actually brought faculty over for the summer. And what they did was kind of went around and met other faculty to find out what research was going on, where there might, and we usually would bring, like chairs, and they would see what was taking place and take it back to their institution to say, this is the type of research that's taking place. And then we would find collaboration where there's synergy and start putting proposals in together. So that was, one thing that I saw that really helped us in this space. And that wasn't just with schools that had close proximity. Those were with schools that were beyond, the state of Georgia.
And I just want to briefly mention, I think it also requires the institutional support. So one of our institutes specifically offers seed funding for partnerships for HBCUs, MSIs with Virginia Tech faculty members. And so it's a process where faculty members have to submit a proposal. They have to describe the roles of both parties, and they have to say what will be the outcomes. So their goal would then say, we'll use this 1 year funding, it may be $10,000, $20,000 to help offset some costs, help support students or materials or equipment. And then they're able to use that to formally submit proposal for their given discipline. So another thing I think is part of the challenges is a way to document, right, these different partnerships where they take place. So this institute, who work closely with the graduate students that I referenced before, they monitor the relationships, they kept track of it and so forth to see, because maybe if somebody leaves the institution, that other person at that HBCU MSI still are willing to partner with the institution. They just would need someone to complete that process. So I think keeping track, having the funds if it's available, to make sure that you, again, commit fully to make sure you can support the HBCU MSI side of that.
So from an HBCU side, one of the things that I've heard our faculty say is that there are times when the larger institutions do not respect the researchers at the HBCU. And also when proposals are written, a lot of times the larger institution, because they have more resources, usually dominates. And so a lot of times there's just that issue. The main thing is probably respect of the researchers. Okay, the next question. Infrastructure. Labs take lots of resources and time. How about co-advising? I am inviting a faculty member to spend a month in my lab. I am funding it. Will be great if there was funding resources. Oh, that's just a comment. Okay, here's another question. My question is re-role models. Do we not have enough role models, and are the ones who are already there not spending enough time to get in front of where need exits? Let me read that again. My question is re-role models. Do we not have enough role models? And are the ones who are already there not spending enough time to get in front where need exits? Anybody want to address that?
Exist. I think the one exists.
Okay,
Yeah.
exists. I think that's what was meant.
Yeah. You type it fast. Yeah.
Anyone want to address that?
Well, I'm wondering. So when I read that and see it, I think we don't have enough role models. So I mean, that's something we're trying. I think all trying to grow. Um, I think the fear for me is actually the other direction, that role models, this has been too much of a drain on their time, and that's why we're trying to build these other structures so that the burden isn't all on specific role models. And I think that's, to me, one of the elements of the intentional outreach from the right universities. And Pamela, to your comment of the right level of respect for the faculty and the students at the institutions to which the outreach is going. Um, because yes, role models are important. They play a big role and they're a big benefit, but you can't use the lack of them, in my mind, as an excuse not to increase engagement and numbers from your side as as a PWI or other institution. So I would slightly turn the question around a bit and say part of what we're doing is how to not require the existing current role models to have to spend too much time while we're building the overall sort of experiences for everyone. I hope that made sense.
Yeah. Any other comments? I can tell you some of my own experiences. Some of my role models did not look like me, and they were excellent. So it role models can come in many different forms. Okay. Faculty are really looking for leadership for a database, potential PhD students, postdocs. Is there any chance that we may be able to get that, a database? Would anyone like to address that? I think this is more of a comment, though, basically saying that that's what they're looking for. I'll go on to
I'll
the next.
just share, Pamela, real quickly. Oh,
Okay,
I was just
go
going to
ahead.
share real quickly, though that would be great. I point out to my faculty, since there isn't one, we can actually beat other people by going out intentionally to places and recruiting these students before anyone else knows about them, because there's a lack of a database. So a little creativity and advanced work on our side um, allows us to get students that other people aren't looking at that are awesome. But yeah, a database would help everyone.
And then I think we have time for two more questions. The next question is, how can we get current graduate students involved in these partnerships? The screen just rolled. And but how can we get graduate students involved in these partnerships? Okay, Gannett?
Strong student organizations, very strong student orgs. We have a very strong National Society of Black Engineers, Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, Society of Women Engineers, both at the grad and undergrad level. Excellent academic advisors who are faculty who conduct research and interact with students and teach in those programs. They build the infrastructure. We sponsor students. We pay for their travel to go to the professional conferences at the national level and interact with other peers. That's the best way for you to build a network with minority students.
But I would also like to chime in and say leveraging your resources, especially your LSAMPs, your Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation, your AGEP, those NSF actual alliances really support that space, right? So we're utilizing mentors who are part of these programs to mentor beyond their own LSAP or their own AGEP, right? So we're going beyond that one alliance and reaching out to other alliances.
So this last question will go to each one of the panel members, and I'd like for you to respond. But are there any challenges that exist in your existing pathways? What are those challenges?
So I would speak for our dual degree engineering program. One of the big challenges are time to completion, right? You're pursuing 2 degrees um, that and at their home institution they're taking 21, 22 hours, right? So that's a very heavy load. And then when they transfer in, they're transferring in midstream, so they're transferring in to where they already have institution, the students have already formed networking groups, right? So we've built, peer mentoring and been very intentional about when they transfer in to build them into our peer mentoring network, where they have upperclassmen and graduate students of color who are mentoring them and giving them that network and getting them acclimated to the culture and climate here on campus. And then that's the other space while we're moving also to develop a BSMS option, because in the time that you're taking to complete that BS, you can complete the BSMS. So we're looking at expanding, as we say, access and giving different ways in which the students can enter and into the stream and achieve those different degrees. So I think that's very important.
Okay, so only 30 seconds for the next few panelists. We only have 2 minutes left. Next.
So I'll just quickly say, on the aspect of really transitioning from to a minority thriving institution, though we've made great strides and there's a lot of good things happening, there's that sort of last piece for many of our faculty to really make it an instinct to switch from a deficit based to a strength based model. It's just, the student body has changed dramatically, and a lot of the thinking is just has been too enculturated in the past, and it's getting it to a new level. So, uh, great things have happened, and faculty are definitely moving in that direction, but continuing that ongoing work is certainly one of our challenges.
Ganesh, 30 seconds.
Sure. I would say a financial need is our biggest barrier, along with what was already mentioned, changing faculty attitudes, and that's a constant work in progress. Financial need is a big challenge because most of these students are taking care of their family and they're often working. And expecting them to go full time in our 4-year institution is a big, big challenge. That's why we've seen increase in the online degree program enrollment by minorities, because they can do it not as full time students. They can take 2 courses and work, but we still need to fund them. The advantage with the online degree programs is that it costs less than the face-to-face program, but is going to give them a sense of isolation because they're working by themselves. So we
Yeah.
would like them to be immersion students, which means we have to fund them at a much, much higher rate than just the Pell Grants. We have to find
Okay.
other scholarships like STEM and other sources to fund.
Thank you. And sorry, Shanita, you're always last, but it's your turn. 30 seconds.
It's fine. All right. So I would say I would change it from challenges just to things to keep in mind, because it's really focused on, I think, with pathways that I've described and thinking about, again, my institution is the student success. I think that is what is of the most importance. And oftentimes it's a number game and students get lost in that experience. I had some who attended HBC's MSIs, they came in expecting a tutoring center. We don't have that for graduate students, right? So how do we still support that student where they don't have to use the funding, right, which Dr. Ganesh already mentioned, to make sure they're able to to learn that background information that they may not have retained or even had the option to take at those smaller institutions. So I think it goes back to really reevaluating, thinking about courses and their experience, which is still valid, but also make sure that we provide that academic support to make sure that
Okay.
they have that foundation and leverage to complete their degree.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, panelists. This was a great discussion. And we will end on that note. So at this point, I will turn the stage over to Dr. Gary May, the co-chair of the Workshop Planning Committee, and he will give wrap-up remarks. And please, if you look into the chat, please enter the questions in the chat box about your experience. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank everyone for participating in the workshop, all three phases of the workshop, especially today's sessions. The contributions to the discussions were very enlightening, and I think we made some progress throughout the entire series. I think Leanne is going to show on our screen the responses to the final poll. If Leanne can hear me. As that's coming up, I'll just mention today's two panels, I think, were pretty thought-provoking as well. We learned about where the data is and how we get access to it and how we can share it in the first panel. In the second panel, we had some really interesting conversations about partnerships between MSIs and PWIs and some of the challenges associated with those, but also the many successes that I think don't get enough of our attention. And some examples on how to make those successful. So you can see the poll question: how will you use the information that you heard today? While the software is thinking, I'll just point out that we do have many grants available for anyone who's interested in furthering the connections and networking that was established here in the workshop series. Staff will get the link posted in the chat, I believe, and please take advantage of those mini grants. Let's see. So here's one response to how the information will be used. That's to try to implement better programming to support and allow minority students to thrive at my institution, to network with others with similar goals. Both very laudable activities. I hope someone also says to try to not reinvent the wheel and use the examples that they were given. There we go. I'm a prophet. Use the ideas from today to develop similar programs that at my institution. Foster relationships with MSIs. All great responses to the poll question. I think we'll be collecting these and putting those into some sort of summary form for your benefit. We will also be sending out a short survey in the coming week to get your feedback on the workshops. So, please complete the survey. It helps the NAE staff continue to improve events like this one and activities designed to increase diversity throughout the entire engineering education system. And just thank you for being engaged and participating and asking questions and making thought-provoking comments and really improving the state of where we are with this particular topic in enhancing the participation of underrepresented minorities in engineering throughout the entire spectrum. So I think the platform will remain available for the next 45 minutes or so if you want to stay engaged and talk to some more people. But that is really the end of the workshop. And again, we appreciate all the participation, and I wish you all the best as we continue on this important mission to improve education in the United States, particularly for underrepresented students in engineering. Thank you.